We've seen some doozies from Karine Jean-Pierre there at the podium in the White House briefing room, but yesterday may have topped them all. Watch this.
He has tools that he's used to make sure that we do this. We actually deal with the immigration system in a humane way, and in a way that is that actually deals with what we're seeing at the border. And that's why you've seen the parolee program be so successful. When it comes to illegal migration, you've seen it come down by more than 90%, and that's because of the actions that this president has taken.
Illegal migration across the border down 90% because of the president's actions. Let's fact check that, shall we? And a lot of other major issues at our southern border. Let's bring in Brandon Judd. He's the president of the National Border Patrol Council. I don't even need an expert on this one, Brandon, but go ahead. Is that what you're witnessing?
I can't believe that this person continues to lie to the American people and nobody calls her out on this. I mean, I'm grateful that you're calling her out on it. I'm grateful that a couple other outlets call her out on it. But the mainstream media allows her to get away with this. Here's the simple facts. Under Donald Trump, we dropped to 45-year lows in illegal immigration. We were apprehending less than 1,000 people a day. Under this administration, we have jumped up to 8,000 people a day. Right now, currently, as we speak, we're apprehending 7,000 people per day. There has not been a drop in anything under this administration. All it is deflection and lies. They have put no policies or programs in place that allows us to secure the border. We continue to see the chaos that has existed from day one since this administration has come into office, and we're already on pace to be the second highest year in the history of the Border Patrol, and the highest year just happens to be under President Biden. There has been no drop whatsoever.
And it's about to get worse. The New York Post is reporting that over 90,000 illegal crossings have occurred just in the last 10 days. And the May 11th deadline is looming, where Title 42 will no longer even give your agents there the fig leaf of control with regard to the CDC's protection over COVID-19. What's going to happen when that Title 40 restriction is lifted, sir?
So let me put numbers in perspective. Numbers are just numbers unless we understand what those numbers actually mean.
Thank you.
When we apprehend 1,000 people per day, we have enough resources to do that to where we can go after the cartels, we can go after the fentanyl, we can go after the criminal aliens, we can go after all of the criminality that exists on the border if we're apprehending 1,000 people per day. Once we start apprehending 3,000 people per day, that's when we start pulling our resources out of the field to do administrative work, such as hospital watch, transport, processing, all of those other duties that are not patrol duties, enforcement duties. Once we hit 5,000 people per day, now the cartels control certain stretches of our border. Once we go into Title 42, once we lose Title 42 and we go into the projected 10,000 to 12,000 people per day, the cartels are going to control all of the border. That's when all of the fentanyl is going to come in. Aliens from special interest countries that want to do our country harm, that's when they're going to be able to make it in. All of this is right on the horizon, and this administration has done nothing to put anything in place to stop this.
And your brothers and sisters in uniform, the Border Patrol agents, what is their job at this point? I know the Biden administration has asked for more funding for more agents, and Republicans are actually pushing back on that because they know that these Border Patrol agents aren't actually patrolling the border anymore, right?
So when you look at those pictures right there, that's not patrolling the border. That's taking people into custody. That's doing administrative work. Then we're taking them back to our stations.
They're just bringing them in, giving them paperwork, and then letting them loose in America, right?
Exactly. That's what's happening. You're going to hear them say, well, we're using Title 8. We're putting them into deportation proceedings. That's true. That's processing. We're putting them into deportation proceedings. But what they're not telling you is then once we put them in those proceedings, we're releasing them into the United States pending a future court date, which they never show up to. So all of these people that we've released into the United States, they're never leaving. The 4 million people that they have released, they're never leaving. And then on top of that, there's been another 1.4 million gotaways. So we've added to our population, just since this administration has been in office, we have added to our population over 5 million illegal border crossers.
Yeah, and there was a time, Brandon Judd, when this discussion, it was kind of the quaint, innocent times of the mid-2000s, where this entire thing boiled down to jobs and the economy and social services, and that's still a major issue. But this week, we saw clearly exactly the danger of this porous border policy We have a mass murderer on the loose right now, illegally in this country. He'd been deported, I believe, up to 5 times, it's been confirmed. And he just killed an entire family of 5. By the way, the victims, also immigrants to this country. They're always the victims of this violent crime from these criminals who are crossing the border. And the Border Patrol, you guys have got to be so frustrated with this because you signed up to actually do the job of keeping these murderers from crossing our border.
We are beyond upset. Every single time that we hear a story like this, we recognize that it's our failures. It's because we weren't able to do our job. It's because this administration has actually put handcuffs on us and they've romanticized criminality that exists on the border. That's the issue today. But then you see Karine Jean-Pierre get up there and say that they've put programs into place. There have been no programs. I'm on the border. I can personally tell you there are no programs in place. But again, nobody fact checks her. So her lies then become the truth. And that's the issue. If people would actually step up, if MSNBC, CBS, ABC, if all of these liberal outlets would actually fact check them, then the American public would know what's going on. All I want is an honest conversation. If you look at
Yeah.
the facts and then you disagree with me and you formulate your opinion based upon all the facts, that's fine. But they're not getting the facts, and that's the problem. They're not allowed to formulate their own opinions based upon all of the facts.
Well said, sir. There also another interesting news item coming from the northern border. Canada used to impose visa requirements for Mexicans in their country. In 2016, they lifted those restrictions. This was supposedly a response to President Trump and his desire to build a wall. Canada was being altruistic. There's, oh, no, listen, we're not going to have any visa requirements for Mexicans anymore. The Biden administration is now asking Canada to reimpose that because we've got a border crisis on the northern border as well because of this administration.
We do, and I worked 8 years on the northern border. I worked in Maine. I worked in Montana. I've obviously worked many years on the southwest border. But when you look at everything that is going on, when you look at what this administration has done, when you look at how they have completely and totally dismantled the immigration system, that's the fact. It's not the rhetoric that you hear coming out of the White House. Notice that every single time that they say something, they don't back anything that they say up with facts. I'm going to
Yeah.
give you the fact. Criminal cartels are generating more profit than they've ever generated before in the history of the United States. There's been more people that crossed the border illegally than in the history of the United States. More gotaways have happened in the history of the United States. More fentanyl and dangerous drugs have entered our country illegally than in the history of the United States. All of those are facts. That clearly shows that there is an open border, and it goes directly opposed to everything, all the rhetoric that this White House says.
We get a lot of lip service right now from politicians. They've obviously recognized that the fentanyl issue is a political issue. It's a loser for people who aren't coming out and saying, yes, we recognize this crisis. Are you telling me, sir, on behalf of the Border Patrol, that if we could actually enforce our existing laws in securing the border, then you've got the resources to be able to actually stem the tide of fentanyl crossing? The problem is all of the resources of the Border Patrol right now are dealing with just processing this flood of people who are allowed to cross in. Is that basically your case?
Absolutely, you hit it. You hit the nail on the head. We
Wow.
have the resources to do what's necessary. And by the way, all it is policy. The taxpayer does not have to shoulder the burden of this. We don't need more border patrol agent. We don't need more technology. We don't need more infrastructure. All we have to have is policy that doesn't cost you anything, and that policy would allow us to secure the border tomorrow. We saw that under President Trump. We don't have to recreate the will. He already gave us the blueprint on exactly what we need to do. I was
Yeah.
there with him. I worked on all of this with him, and I know exactly what needs to be done. And what's really frustrating is Mayorkas also knows what needs to be done. The White House knows what needs to be done. I've had those conversations with Mayorkas. I've sat down with him, and I have discussed exactly what is necessary to secure the border. He just completely ignores everything because the open border activists want what's currently going on. Just
Yep.
look at the White House. Look at the West Wing. It's permeated with activists. That's who the political appointees are in our government today. They come from activist backgrounds. They want this chaos.
Yeah, and I just want to be clear here. When you say new policy is needed, not new legislation, not one single vote has to be cast, not one bill has to be signed into
Correct.
law, because the law is already there. This administration, they're using their discretion to ignore the law and get around the law. You are a great advocate for the men and women who wear that uniform in our Border Patrol. I really appreciate you joining us, Brandon Judd, as always. There's more to come on O'Connor tonight.